When starting my film, I knew I wanted to make something that focused largely on the visual elements, much like 2005's Sin City. While watching it, I really liked its use of comic book mise-en-scène and visual symbolism to portray character motivations, roles, and character types. Along with Sin City, I was also partially influenced by 2004's Spider-Man 2. Working within the superhero genre gave me a lot of narrative tropes and iconography to work with for my film. I see my short film perspectives as a superhero origin story. It opens up to the protagonist sitting at his desk in an office building lobby at night time. He hears a sound from the hall and goes to investigate without incident. However, upon returning, he is assaulted by a mysterious assailant, which causes the start of a metamorphosis for the character's perception of the world. Throughout the rest of the film, we see how he responds to this alteration, and in the end comes to certain realizations about the world and life he had been living in. Rather than show the character's transformation through acting or performance, I wanted to focus more on the mise-en-scène and environments. Therefore, I used CGI environments so I could have complete control over the set. As a result, there are three main sections to the film: the blue section, the white section, and the black section. Each named as such speaks to the different colour of costume the protagonist wears, and each has a very different look in the environment and meaning behind them. The blue section is the one we first see in the film, and by far is the most grounded of the three. This section represents the world how the protagonist used to see it. Unlike the other two, everything is very defined in this world. The environment itself appears to be very sterile, tame, and secure. However, we do see part of the black segment through the windows of this area. This clues the audience in that there's something more to this world than the sterile environment we see at first, and that at some point the two may intertwine, as we see when the assailant attacks the protagonist. Before reaching the white sequence, we see a shot from below of the lobby the protagonist has spent the beginning of the film in. His area of safety and security appears small as a tiny white window in a black void, is where we first see the idea of that the world he used to live in was artificial, something which is expanded on in the white sequence and the black. The white segment of the film is the middle part, and is the transitional period for the protagonist. In this part, he is seeing the world he was in from his new perspective. The protagonist is in a white void surrounded by multiple glowing paths, each with an angelic silhouetted figure walking on them. Looking to the horizon, we see all the paths eventually meet together, and all the other silhouettes are walking towards them unperturbed. This brings up the idea that they are the majority and they are all together. By having the protagonist stop walking forward and not be part of the march, is the first thing that begins to separate him from the majority. The paths themselves represent these people's lives. All these people go from point A to B without ever stopping to pause to think. The sequence acts as a rather introspective moment for the protagonist, as this is the first time he's ever viewed his life or the life of others around him this way, and it is upon this realization that by the end of the film he chooses to reject this old life. But before that, there is the black sequence. At first, the black sequence is shown to be a sinister and harsh place by the use of high contrast colours, sharp edges to the lines, and ambiguous environments and props which are open to interpretation. This represents how the protagonist feels facing an entire world from this new perspective that was different from his own. Along with this, the protagonist has now been physically branded with a mask over the lower portion of his face. Along with making him appear visually different than he did before, this also removes him from his old identity. It is by the end of the segment, when the protagonist chooses to accept this new lifestyle, that the world becomes less sinister to him. This is shown by his defeat of the antagonist figure, and by his choice to go to the right in the final shot of the film, away from the herd. This was my first time attempting green screen for a film. There are many areas to do with the technical issues, like the lighting on the green screen itself interfering with the cropping. I felt it went rather well. However, when watching the film play back, there are some shots in the film that linger too long and I would cut shorter. Along with this, the inclusion of more ambient sounds, and possibly even a soundtrack at some points, would have helped get the message for the film across. However, from a purely visual perspective, I think the film managed to achieve the Sin City effect I was going for.